Hello, this is Lee Bellinger with the Bellinger Report. I'm the publisher of Off Grid Confidential, probably one of the last information financial newsletters to be delivered 100% through the mail and completely independent of the internet and big tech scolds because the post office only delivers. They don't get involved in what I can say and what I can't say. And I've been publishing continuously since 1988. Today, I've got an old friend, Craig Huey. And Craig puts out two newsletters, online newsletters, the Huey Report and the Reality Report. And Craig is a bit of a sage. He wrote a book a number of years back, which I understand you're updating, called The Deep State.
Yes.
And you're one of the authorities on it, and you've been talking about election theft and all kinds of how the left has been getting away with murder for a long time. And you're advising Christian voters on how to organize. And something tells me down the road that you're going to be leading a lot of the charges against the big left-wing corporations that are fascists in the sense that they're publicly controlled but privately owned still, but not truly pro-liberty anymore, and that you'll be talking about pro-liberty businesses and educating Americans about that at the grassroots level. This is all critically important, as you and I have discussed. And you have another awesome book called The Christian Voter. And so, well, Craig, I think maybe the first thing we can discuss is your deep state book. So you're updating it, and sadly, a lot of what you'd warned about has come true.
That's right.
And now your book is out of date because it's been validated, and now you've got to forge on to bold new predictions.
Well,
So we certainly want to hear all about it.
yeah, well, let's put it this way. The book really isn't so much out of date, is that so much has happened in the last couple of years that needs to be updated.
Oh
Because
yes,
what the book does, it talks about this dramatic growth of the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. And it talks about how foundations and the media collude with the deep state. And it gives examples. And it talks about this whole issue that we just experienced with voter fraud. It gives details of how voter fraud takes place. And finally, it explains something most people don't know. Lee, you've been around for a long time.
don't remind me.
I tell people you have probably the best newsletter in the world because you give a geo-economic point of view for investors and people interested in this country that they can't find elsewhere. And basically what you've seen over the years and what you've covered is that government's out of control. The bureaucracy keeps growing. For the first time, the bureaucracy was shaken up by Donald Trump. And we could talk about that if you want. But the bureaucracy is different than it was back in the 1970s, in the 1980s, or way before. What the bureaucracy is number one, every bureaucracy, Lee, wants to grow itself, wants to be able to get more tax money, more power, more influence. The second thing a bureaucracy does is that it wants to defend itself from attack, defend itself from any type of harm. That's been the history of bureaucracy. But President Obama added a third ingredient that has been taken over by President Biden on steroids. And that is the bureaucracy's third element is being ideologically driven. We have bureaucrats who are not good managers, but they're politicians that are believing in a vision of transforming our culture and our politics into a socialist type government. And they want to use the bureaucracy to achieve political ends. And this was going on under Obama. And Trump tried to stop it. He tried to drain the swamp. He tried to be able to downsize it. And the problem was before, and I go into detail on this in my book, how the bureaucracy was protected so that when Trump came in, many of these political appointees who were trying to destroy anything that would harm them, try to destroy anything that would downsize the country, the bureaucracy, and stop anything that would stop the march towards socialism. These bureaucrats could not be fired. They were basically given life terms. And even the people who were doing the hiring in the executive service, they were made into career bureaucrats who could hire ideologues. So, Lee, many people were shocked that when Biden got in the office, he signed executive orders within a week. That's because the bureaucracy had already prepared the plans and the details, so all he had to do was sign on the dotted line. It was horrific. And what we're experiencing now is not just the attacks of the media, not just attacks of the politicians, but we got a bureaucracy that's out of control, ideologically driven, trying to achieve goals and objectives at taxpayers' expense.
Yes, and they certainly were effective at sabotage. The president couldn't even make foreign phone calls without them leaking it. Now, you got to think about that at the beginning of his administration. Who on God's green earth would have the power to take the president's calls and turn them over to the New York Times and Washington Post? I mean, there's not a huge job description of how many people have that type of access, and they just got away with it. They never got identified. It's unthinkable. It's unthinkable that this, I mean, you knew that the president was in big trouble when he got in there, when you started seeing that, and it was done, nobody ever raised any questions about it.
The first 6 months of him being president, there were literally hundreds and hundreds of leaks that were illegal, unethical, and immoral. Those leaks were out to destroy his policies and destroy the man. And guess what, Lee? How many leaks have happened since President Biden has been president?
Oh, indeed.
If you have a problem thinking about it, it's zero.
Well, I don't think he has a whole lot to say behind the scenes. President Trump had a hell of a lot to say, but President Trump had a lot of press conferences. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's I don't know. I wish there was a politer way to say it, but you've got a hideous mannequin that they roll out for public appearances, and you've got all of these sneaky people behind the scenes that are actually running the show. I mean, I'm thinking maybe we should call for Harris to just be inaugurated, so that at least have an honest face of who the administration really is, instead of this guy who's perceived as a moderate. Maybe that would be. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if people have the stomach for that, but I'm just saying. Maybe we should start calling for her to be signed in, because if she was signed in, then at least we would know who we're dealing with, instead of all these hidden powers behind the throne. That's like a spooky thing. Not to mention, he could get us into a war without a whole hell of a lot of problem. I mean, you saw what happened with FDR. He gave away Eastern Europe. He was sick. He gave away Eastern Europe. We were in 40 years of Cold War. We almost got annihilated in Cuba and a couple other times. So during the Cuban Missile Crisis of '62, for goodness sakes. I mean, these all sprung from FDR not being able to handle himself at Yalta. And he looked a hell of a lot like Joe Biden does today. I'm just saying. I don't need. And by the way, I mean,
you're 100% right.
I don't. My mom died of Alzheimer's. I'm not into attacking people because of their mental deficiencies. But for God's sake,
look at the bureaucrats around him, with the Department of Defense, the Department of State, all these different government agencies that are planning. They're basically in a position of planning what I would call appeasement. It's a foreign policy of appeasement, and that's why Israel struck the nuclear issues involving Iran, because right now the State Department, the Department of Defense, and all these different agencies are on full-on attack against Israel and for the Palestinians.
I don't think the president's even talked to the Israelis yet.
It's insane.
But I mean, it's crazier than that, because he comes into office and he treats American energy independence like it's a problem, attacking it like it's an actual problem. And so what we've got now, and not only do we have rising gasoline prices on the working people of this country and the working families of this country, but we also have a scenario where we're going to be involved in Iran's politics now, because we couldn't do this like we could before under President Trump. We didn't need their oil.
No,
We don't need their oil, and now they want to go back to us being dependent on Middle Eastern oil. I mean,
it's
are they
insane.
nuts?
No, it's their agenda
I
that's
know.
ideologically decision. Now, you mentioned something about foreign policy. I know most people are interested in domestic policy, but I got to tell you, you said something that is very, very true. We could be finding ourselves in a war because of the appeasement policies. Taiwan is the most dangerous issue around. Most people even don't know what the Republic of China, which is Taiwan, it's a pro-capitalist, anti-communist government off the shore. It used to be part of China. Many in Taiwan think that they're really the rulers of China and that the communists stole it from them. And the communists in China, that's one of their number one goals, is to take over China. This could be war.
And the thing is,
yeah,
Taiwan is a mortal threat to the mainland in one way, because like a virus, it can reproduce.
yes,
It's a showcase of 24 million people, of Chinese who are financially successful and
yes,
innovative, and they can't, they're afraid of it. They're rightly afraid of it, because if Taiwan survives in the long run, that virus will ultimately infect, the freedom virus will infect the mainland.
yes,
And that is why it's a vital interest of the United States. Not to mention that the South China Sea, there's $4 trillion in commerce that goes through, at least it was pre-pandemic,
yes,
going through that region, and they're basically wanting to nationalize all that international water.
that's right.
And they're not. It's not about us getting in their face and interfering. It's like they want to annex a massive amount of international water, so that basically our ships can't go through there anymore. It becomes a Chinese lake, and it's crazy. And so Taiwan also blocks them going out
That's right.
to the west.
Yes.
So it's also a very important piece of real estate, and you've got people anyway. It's just, but I
It,
keep thinking about
their plan
FDR.
is
I keep thinking about
have
FDR at Yalta, and I
yes.
look at him. I mean, he even looks like FDR at Yalta. He really does, and it ain't a pretty picture. And I'm like going, I'd rather have Harris in there if we have to have a choice, because Joe Biden is a complete misrepresentation of his actual administration. And
I'll
you've
go
got
back.
this
I'll go
guy
back
on.
to this, Lee. Yes, Harris would be more articulate, but the thing is, it's these deep state bureaucrats he's put in, whether it's Harris or Biden, they're doing the controlling. I mean, what's happened with the military? It's a laughing stock to the military in China and the military in Russia and the military in Iran. What they're doing in undermining our ability. And I don't know if the viewers of this podcast know, but when, for example, Tucker Carlson attacked the military for not being prepared to fight off communist China and other enemies, he was attacked on taxpayers' money by the Department of Defense, by the Army, the Navy,
Oh
the
yeah.
Air Force, and the Marine. The military propaganda machine went after an American commentator. And whether the guy's right or wrong, never in the history of America has the military tried to propagandize within the United States.
I want to switch tacks with you for just a moment,
Yeah.
about your online newsletter, the Huey Report for Christians, because it's some of the most sophisticated advice to people of faith I've ever seen out there. Because you're an old political pro, you've worked in the California. I mean, you've been on the losing side of the politics in California. You've seen all the mistakes. You your reporting foreshadowed, election night 2020 long before it actually happened. And I know that your particular letter caught the attention of President Trump, and I'd like you to tell us just a little bit about how that went. And I haven't actually met President Trump, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what he's like, what your experience with him was like, etc.
Well, let me put it in context. I have two newsletters. One's called the Huey Report, which is geopolitics and economics. And the other one is the Reality Alert, which are for evangelical Christians.
I got it backward. My apologies.
It's okay. And Reality Alert is a newsletter that is for people of faith. They believe that Jesus Christ lived and died for their sins and set them free. And they have a worldview that's based upon biblical truth. And I write to them about what's going on. And yes, it's caught a lot of attention. It's created a lot of controversy. And we come up with original material people normally don't hear.
They don't.
Yeah.
Very sophisticated stuff.
Yeah. And so my wife and I were invited to a lot of events, one with President Trump. And I have an article, and people can go to Reality Alert newsletter. It's at electionforum.org, and they can go to it and just put in, for example, Trump, and it'll be one of the articles that comes up. I think my wife had the most powerful thing, more powerful than what I said. She said, "President Trump, I have a word for you." And he said, "Okay, tell me what that is." And she goes like this.
That sounds like her.
He's standing back, and he starts coming forward, and the Secret Service start getting out their guns, and she goes like this. And he says, "What?" And she says, "Let me whisper in your ear." And so he turns and whispers in the ear. By this time, the Secret Service doesn't know what's going on, and so face to face, she's whispering in President Trump's ear that God loves you, and God's got a plan for America, and that God also will speak to you. And he said, and she quoted the verse, a verse that says, God wasn't in the thunder, he wasn't in the earthquake, he was in the small whisper. And she said, and she was whispering this to President Trump, he's in the small whisper. Listen to his voice and follow his words. And that was just one example of powerful influence, and that President Trump was probably the first president, even more so than Ronald Reagan, who surrounded himself with people of prayer and people who said, America has a special place in history, and that it's the defender of religious liberty. It's the country where greater prosperity has happened in America than anywhere in the world, because people have respected the biblical value of inalienable rights. The Declaration of Independence said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that with this, more churches have developed. Christians have been able to preach the gospel without government control. More missionaries have been sent out worldwide, and our nation has been blessed. And so that's basically is the message to President Trump and the message to the world, that God has plans. And so we encourage people to continue to pray for President Trump, pray for this nation, and pray that the next person running for president is going to be open to people of faith, because never before in the history of the United States have Christianity, Christians, and the church been under attack as much as they are right now.
That's right. And so I wondered if you had any thoughts on the state, one thing that we lack terribly have been uh, uh, pro-liberty entertainment. And I think in all, the social and building into the social model, we have at least 74 million households that are pro-liberty, and they've all
Yes.
been disenfranchised from the internet.
Yes.
There's roughly, really, it's more like 100 million people who I've told you this before, so they were disenfranchised and couldn't talk about Biden Hunter on social media before the election. After the election, they couldn't talk about the election results, compare notes, talk about it, and it was all banned. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, how do we fight back? And so then I think something actually good happened. So millions of conservatives went to Parler, which was an alternative, very small alternative to Facebook. And then all the big tech giants got together and they saw that Parler lifeboat in mid-ocean, and they all machine gunned it and sank it, just like the old U-boat commanders did, in World War II. And I'm wondering if that incident, I know that the machine gunning of helpless people in the water in mid-ocean after the ship had been sunk, that galvanized Americans against the Nazis. But I'm wondering if the Christians, if conservatives and pro-liberty Americans, even if they're atheists, that's okay. That really is okay. And if they're pro-liberty, we need them.
Yes.
And if they could be tolerant of Christians and the reverse,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And so I see that they do have something like PureFlix, and they have some embryonic new things that are going. And I wondered if you've been paying attention to that trend, and see options. And maybe sometimes when something bad happens, like the machine gunning of Parler in mid-ocean, when something bad happens like that, good things come out of it, because we're both old pros and we both know that the law of unintended consequences often works in our favor. Because if you're, one of the great things about the flaws in human nature does protect us. If you're blinded by hubris, which does blind you, you make mistakes. And I'm really counting on that for the other side
Yeah.
to make some of these mistakes, because they've had their way for so long. And I'm wondering if, PureFlix and those types of things, do you feel like we're going to see the emergence of a new internet? I mean, there's 100 million people who don't have a home now.
Yeah.
And you're like, one of the reasons I talk to you normally, I don't talk, my publication is pretty darn secular in how I report things. But the situation is so dire right now. I think it's time to have that conversation with people. And so if you've got some thoughts on where
I certainly do. We have a situation right now where if somebody is reading Apple News, somebody is getting their news from Facebook or from, any type of online service, if they do a Google search, Lee, if I do a Google search right now on any topic, let's say I do it on Black Lives Matter, let's say I do it on inflation and the growing economic debt. If I do that search, Google will marginalize anybody that comes up with a conservative or libertarian or free market point of view. What will happen is basically this, that I'll get maybe 10, 12 pages before all of a sudden I see Newsmax or National Review or Town Hall or Cato Institute. Nobody searches that deep. Nobody goes down that deep. They put at the top CNN, MSNBC, and Newsweek, and the American Center for Progress, and all these left-wing groups. That's how people are getting their information. They're being duped. They're being lied to. It is discrimination against the free flow of ideas. And so more and more people understand this. They understand that they're not getting the truth. And this has become so self-evident, and so people are becoming more and more aware. I believe that these alternative sources like Parler are going to boom. And I believe that you're going to see this monopoly that's taken place come crashing down. And that's why you see big tech like Facebook and Twitter and Google saying, hey, we need a little bit of regulation here, because they'll manipulate that regulation to stop competition. They'll use the government bureaucracy and the FCC and the FTC and the government agencies to protect their monopoly. We've got to be diligent in what's done to be able to protect freedom of speech and freedom of thought. And really, the free market's going to bring out different competition. Netflix, 80% of Netflix are horrific programs from a propaganda point of view. My wife and I were watching, Lee, this Netflix program, and we're thinking, man, this is such a great action program, constantly keeping us on the edge of our seats, great acting, great entertainment, but it had a message that was anti-conservative and anti-freedom, really. And it was all hidden in there. They have an agenda. And yes, you could, like on Netflix, put down Christian movies or conservative films, and a few things will pop up, but you have to really search for them. PureFlex, your readers, your viewers should get PureFlex, where they can be 100% confident about what the content is. It's a competitor to Netflix, and there's going to be more competitors, and more competitors will be coming out with search. More competitors will be coming out with things like Twitter and video. Oh my gosh, video by YouTube is so discriminatory. It's unbelievable how they're silencing truth, how they're outlawing truth, and they're banning video after video of truth. And there's other ways of being able to get out there, and that's going to start booming. And so people have to be aware that these alternative sources exist and start using them. And so I'm excited. So I do tweets. I have Facebook. My tweets have been marginalized by Twitter. They have shrunk my reach down dramatically. Facebook, I used to do articles and go all over the internet. Google would report on it. It'd be everywhere. Now it's shrunk down, and their algorithms are discriminating against us. We've even had ISPs. There have been ISPs where people, any of your viewers, they're in a certain area, they get the internet, the ISP, usually a phone company like Verizon or something, they will take the email. Well, what they did is that anybody who got my email, they click on an article, nothing would come up. They just got the email and they couldn't get to the internet because the ISP was blocking it. We had a 6-month battle to be able to open up from 2 ISPs that were doing this. So it is a problem, and it's a growing problem, but it's not a problem without a solution. But I do believe that you're right, Lee. You're going to see the growth of these alternative sources. President Trump's trying to start one. Others are trying to start them. Great. Let there be competition and let the best one be able to dominate. But right now, that last election for president with Biden versus Trump was just one indication of how a monopoly can really impact an election and distort the results of that election because people haven't heard the alternative. They've only heard one side.
It is a big challenge for us, and I'm just glad that you're out there with the content that you've been developing, because it's very sophisticated. A lot of the Christian stuff I see is not that sophisticated, and yours is tempered with a lot of very practical guidance. Can you just go ahead and repeat how people can reach and get your stuff?
Yes. First of all, they can go to electionforum.org.
Forum?
Electionforum.org. And then they'll be able to sign up for my newsletter, Reality Alert. They can also order my book. They can go to Amazon and order my book as well. It hasn't been banned there yet. and it's called the Christian Voter Book. And so the Christian Voter, it is so timely right now, Lee, that it will give them 12 reasons Christians have to vote for freedom. It gives 12 issues that are what we call the non-negotiables for Christians. Protecting the persecuted church, protecting Israel, being able to stop things like the Equality Act that President Biden is trying to push through right now. That would be the most historic, destructive effort on Catholics or Protestants. For evangelicals, it's designed to destroy the church. And these are big issues now. And that's why I wrote this book, so people can understand them.
That's important, Craig. I'll tell you what, it's a privilege to talk to you. I'm very moved by a lot of the work you do, and I appreciated I appreciated your time today. Is there anything I'm missing that you would like to add for people that I might have missed in my questions?
Well, I would say this, that everybody who's listening may feel disappointed, even depressed by what they see is going on. But if they're listening, I know that they're fighters. I know they're warriors. They want to help transform culture and politics for the better. And I got to tell you, I believe we can do it. I don't think it's over. I think it's the beginning of a major way of change that's going to start in the 2022 election. So I encourage people to have hope and have optimism that we can do this. We can take over despite big tech, despite the voting irregularities. We can win in 2022.
This has been coming for a while. You and I have discussed this before, but
Right.
these Republican poll watchers never did their job. They set the precedent. That's why Trump didn't have any traction in courts, because we had accepted. Yeah, sure, the state legislatures are supreme in the Constitution when it comes to these issues, but if they didn't assert themselves, then the courts really can't do much for it. It's like a squatter sitting on, you got a 20-acre place, and a squatter's just sitting out there on 2 acres of it, way out in the back, and he's been there for 25 years, and you didn't pay attention. And so I think that cleaning out the RNC and the RNCC and all
Yes.
cleaning that stuff out and getting the political hacks the hell out, because that's what happens. They get, and that's why a lot of these Republican election officials, they were, when people finally noticed that they hadn't been doing their job for 20 years, they said, "Oh no, the election was fair and honest," and then not enough of them stood up and said, "This is BS." And so that's really something that we all have to look at, and I hope that there's going to be corrections in that, because that's something we have to take back. And assert ourselves. If you don't assert if you sit there and let them, I mean, President Trump is the first president to ever stand up to political correctness, and we waited way too long to do that. And it isn't easy. And so somebody had to be but it's like most pioneers, they come back with a bunch of arrows in their back. Maybe then, and he's the first one to do it. And so this is something that it took a man just like him, and maybe he was put in office to he was the only guy that was tough enough to kick the FDA in the butt and the big pharma in the butt and get us a cure for coronavirus. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe, I don't know. I think he might have saved the country when he did that. Nobody could have done it in less than a year than that guy. I mean, think about it, Craig. Talk about unintended consequences.
He ordered the bureaucracy. Lee, he ordered the bureaucracy to get out of the way.
He got them the hell out of the way.
To stop its overregulation.
That's exactly my point. That's my whole point. Is that who else could have done that? It takes a decade to you can throw all the money at it you want, and we did throw a lot of money at it, but this was a scenario where we got a result that no other politician, in my opinion, would have ever gotten.
Yeah.
So
let me mention one more thing, Lee. So I would hope people would subscribe to my newsletter, Reality Alert. I would hope that people would buy my book. You know what they could do if they did that? They could send that out to everybody on their email list, my newsletter. to try to expand it. Same thing with Amazon. They could write a review, and that's what gets more people coming in and buying a book. What about for you, Lee? Think of the people who could tell friends about Off the Grid newsletter, tell people about your service, and be able to be warriors instead of just receiving. Be an activist. That's what the left does. They tell people on Twitter, they tell people on Facebook, they tell people everywhere they can. They do it with email. They do it with any type of thing they can. Hey, read this, look at this, listen to this, watch this. Those people who are watching this podcast, they can be warriors from their house to help make change. And the starting point is to take this podcast and take your material and let others know about it. And believe me, that's the start of our transformation.
That is the start of our transformation, Craig. And I want to thank you, Craig Huey, author of awesome book called The Deep State, and also The Christian Voter. And I'm most grateful to you for making the time today. You've done double duty, and thank you for that. Not even saying anything about that. I'm grateful for sometimes not saying something is better than saying something, and I really appreciate that. So, Craig, this is Lee Bellinger of the Bellinger Report, and we will be calling in on you in the near future. I will when you're ready to re-release your book, The Deep State. And hopefully we can have some more time to talk about that in a near future, Craig.
That'd be awesome. Thank you, Lee.
Thanks for your time, man. Thank you. Okay. All right.
You got it?
I did, Craig. Thank you so much.